This is our trip along the Blue Ridge Parkway, across Shenandoah, and into Gettysburg, and then on into the Hershey RV show. So you'll see different snippets from each part of that trip, and as we get to it, I will kind of describe what you're seeing and why we made the choices we made with regards to this trip. This is President Eisenhower's house. He bought a property there at Gettysburg following his presidency. Well, actually following his stint in the war. And so you can learn a lot about him from the film that Walter Cronkite did. It's located in the barn there at the property, and they offer tours of his farm and of his home. And so you'll learn quite a bit about his life. The man was extremely interesting, very brave, and had a great sense of duty for his country. To Gettysburg, one of the first things we did was go to the visitor center. When at the visitor center, you have the option to purchase tickets to go through the museum and watch the cyclorama movie. That probably was the best money we spent. It actually put the Civil War into perspective. It talks about both sides of the war, casualties on both sides, the number of deaths, how choices in the battle affected each side. And you learn about President Lincoln's role. And this is the cemetery, which is probably what we did last, so this is a little out of order, but after you do the museum, the cyclorama, and then we rode our bikes over the ground, so we rode our bikes on the auto tour of the entire and visited each side of the battle, and so you kind of see that here. After we did that, then we went to the cemetery the next day and visited the grave sites where you saw people from the Mayflower buried, Korean War, World War I, World War II, and of course the cemetery. What was most interesting to us is the actual superintendent of the cemetery, the initial cemetery back in the 1800s. He actually fought and was wounded in the Civil War. And so here you can see President Lincoln, that's him in this picture. and this is where they believe he delivered the Gettysburg Address. What you're about to see, you need to pause and read. This was the instructions to keep the soldiers healthy. Many soldiers died. In fact, more died from illness than actual injury in the Civil War. When we went to the Hershey RV show, we stayed at the Hershey RV Resort. They had what you saw previously, a bus that would take you to and from the RV show. And while there at the RV show, we walked the mile over to the Hershey Chocolate Factory and toured the chocolate factory, as well as doing the historical trolley tour, which we highly recommend. It gives you information you wouldn't otherwise learn about Milton Hershey. The man was incredibly generous after failing 6 times in trying to make chocolate and make a living for his family.
And you can taste the love all over the world. Taste the love. Taste the love. Taste the love all over the world.
So this was our first really big trip since Brian retired in March, and so we kind of took our time going from Oklahoma all the way up to Pennsylvania, where you see us here. And Gettysburg is huge, and you really need to visit the visitor center, learn about the different battles, the players in the battle, so that you can kind of have perspective when you go out, whether you do the riding tour in your automobile or bike it like we did. We biked the auto tour. And then the National Park app has an audio tour that you just play. You hit the number and it will play and give you the history about each site, where they go into detail about the forces there, the number of losses, casualties, and all that. And we were just astounded by the number of people that actually died in the war. And one of the biggest things that really surprised me was the fact that more people died fighting that battle from illness, malaria, and things, or from not knowing to wash and bathe and that type of thing and keep themselves clean. So they handed out cards to each soldier on how to take care of themselves, just bathing, hygiene, that type of thing. And so we were amazed by that.
I agree.
What was your biggest takeaway?
I thought it was interesting to see the hospital they had that, basically it started out, I don't remember which side it started out with, but then they turned around and then somebody, the other side came in and took over the hospital too, and were taking care of both sides of the illness and people that are injured and stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty amazing the way that all came about.
Yeah, they had at one point 450 soldiers lined up in the floor of that hospital there, Union soldiers, and then all of a sudden you had the South come in and kind of take over, and they basically were taking care of both Union and the Southern soldiers. So it was interesting.
Yes, it was. Pretty interesting trip.
So we really enjoyed it. We hope you sometime get to make a trip up there and experience it and see history for what it is. This is my favorite way to learn history is by experiencing it and see it and make it more tangible rather than reading it in a book. So